Welcome to this special edition of Capitol Dateline. We're on the floor of the Florida Senate with Senate President Don Gates and House Speaker Will Weatherford. And Mr. President, we're glad to be here in the Senate with you.
Well, welcome to the House of Lords. We appreciate you coming over.
You feel like a lord?
No, I don't. But
you're referring to the British Parliament.
British Parliament, absolutely. And you know, the House of Lords is only a ceremonial group now. They don't have much power. Everything is done in the Commons. That's the same way it is here. The House of Representatives has all the authority, and we just try to fumble along, go along, totter along behind them.
Of course, we just refer to them as the upper chamber, though.
I see. Okay. Well, we're just a tad past the midpoint of session. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's approaching, but it's not quite here yet. And Mr. Speaker, we'll start with you. If you had to put a headline on this part of the session, where you are right now, what would it be?
I think the headline I would probably say where we are right now, what I would hope that people would say about the half point of the session is that it's been based on policy over politics and personality. I think people are tired of this process where it seems to be so driven by personality conflicts and personal agendas and politics. And you know, the Senate President and I started out the session saying there were certain things we wanted to achieve. And so far, both of our houses have been working diligently to get those done. Our offices communicate regularly. I see the President from time to time, or we have conversations in passing, or our chairman, our leadership teams are communicating, and I could not be happier with where we are. And any disagreement that ever comes about between the two chambers, and frankly, they've been minimal, they've been based on policy. There's no personality conflicts, there's no political conflicts, everything has been driven on policy, and I think that's what the citizens of Florida want and expect, and I think that's what we're giving them.
Do you know that there are probably some people just find that too good to be true? They've been wanting that sort of thing a lot in Washington, and they may find that headline to be, wow, is it really true?
They probably do find it to be too good to be true, but it is true. And our job, I think, is not just to do that for the first 5 weeks, but to do that for 9. And that's the challenge, because the pressure cooker gets hotter. People tend to get a little more desperate. People's feelings get hurt those last couple of weeks of session. And our job as the leaders of our chambers is to make sure that we maintain that level of communication and maintain the focus on policy and not on personality and politics.
All right, Mr. President, your headline.
Not like Washington, not like New York. You know, everything I think tends to be relative in people's minds. Are things better or worse than something else? And of course, in Washington, we've got a Congress of the United States that can't even develop a budget, let alone a balanced budget. We'll have a budget. It'll be balanced. We'll live within our means. Unlike Washington, we'll pay down our debt while meeting critical needs. In Washington, they'll increase their debt and not meet the needs of the country. And not like New York. Just last week, Governor Cuomo, in a bare bones budget, proposed that in a state that has a population about the size of Florida, they have 300,000 more people than Florida. You know, we picked up 2 members of the United States Congress as a result of reapportionment and the census, and they lost 2. We picked up their 2, so we're about the same size state. Governor Cuomo, in a bare bones budget, $142 billion state budget, twice the size of the Florida budget. So we're spending half as much money as a state about our size, and we're balancing our budget, and we're living within our means, and we're making choices and meeting critical needs. That ought to be good news to the people of Florida.
Mr. President, in the mad scramble that is left over the last few weeks, what comes to your mind when I ask you the question, what do we absolutely have to get done as far as you're concerned?
Well, what we have to get done is pass a budget. That's our constitutional responsibility. But the Speaker and I articulated 5 areas where we wanted to make progress during the time that he's Speaker and that I'm President. And, you know, that's ethics reform, campaign finance reform, elections reform, education, both higher education and K-12, lashing education closer to the realities of the economy, and pension reform. And as the Speaker said, we're making progress on all of them. We think that this week in the Florida legislature, we'll pass the education reforms that the Speaker and I have been working on, the key priorities in education that he has, and the key priorities that the Senate has. We'll get that done this week, and I think we're making progress on all of the other areas as well. But it's the work plan, Florida, that the Speaker and I articulated at the beginning of the session. That's the issues that we need to do, that we want to do, that we ought to do, and the budget is one we have to do.
All right, let's go to the budget for a minute, and then let's come back to some of those priorities, including education. Mr. Speaker, on the budget, your budgets look an awful lot alike on the revenue targets and the priorities. What are some of the differences that still remain to be worked out at this point between you and the Senate and the House and the governor?
You know, I'll tell you, not many. You know, we obviously don't know exactly what the Senate's going to do with their budget when they put it out. They don't know exactly what we're going to do. But in crafting each other's budgets, we came almost to the exact same spot. And so there's a commitment both in the House and Senate to spend $1 billion for education. When we rolled our budget out, I said if there's a winner in this, it's educating our students. And I think that is a priority that the governor has had, the Senate president has, and I certainly have. But with regard to differences in the budget, they're minimal. They're things that I think we can work through. They're very conservative budgets. I thought the Senate president articulated very well. When you compare us to other states our size and you look at the size of our budget, it is much, much smaller. And that shows that we're meeting our state's basic needs, but we're not burdening our state with entitlements and things that we can't afford to pay for. We lost a champion this week in Margaret Thatcher for freedom and for economic prosperity. And something she always talked about is being careful that we don't build government up to be so big that you create a dependency state. We should create a state where people who work hard and want to provide for their families can have success. And I think Florida's doing that on a shoestring budget that meets the critical needs but doesn't overspend our state's taxpayer dollars.
Let me ask you the same question, Mr. President. Being so close in so many areas, are there yet some differences that, in your opinion, need to be ironed out that could be sticking points?
Well, we're very close, but there are differences, but they're actually happy differences. I'll give you an example. Both the Speaker and I are committed to making sure that our state workers who haven't had a raise in 6 years would get a raise. So here's the difference, and it's a happy one. The Senate's budget says, let's give them a 3% raise. The House's budget says, let's give everybody $1,400. So when you look at it, what the House is trying to do is make sure that we have a bottom-loaded raise to take care of people who are getting paid less, and proportionately they'd get more. So, you know, we're looking at a percentage raise. It's a happy difference because whichever way we slice it, people who have been sort of on a parched desert as far as pay increases are concerned for 6 years are going to get some help. But it's one of those things where it's easy for me as Senate President to say, you know, the House plan looks kind of good. Is there a way we could take that concept and even improve on it, improve our plan? So those are the kinds of differences that we have. On education, we've got a little bit of difference in terms of dollars that we would put into K-12, but nothing that we can't work out. You know, I think we would put a little more in education, they would put a little bit more in health care, but those are things we can work out. There are no differences in the budget that I can see that would be the rock upon which the session would perish. There are differences that I think offer us the opportunity to actually look for better solutions by examining each other's plans.
Let's talk about something that each of you have focused on, higher education. You both have some interesting ideas. Mr. Speaker, with regard to online or digital education, that's something that you have advocated not only for higher education but also for K through 12. You'd like to expand that, make it available to more students. What's your vision there, and what's driving that vision?
Well, I just think what technology's done is it's made it easier for people to have high-quality education at a price you can afford it. Right now, it is expensive to get an education in the state of Florida. A lot of that expense is not actually tuition, although a lot of people believe that. A lot of the expense is room and board, and it's the books, and it's going to class and transportation. And so what online learning does is it actually just flattens the surface so that everybody has access to high-quality education. And what we're working on with the Senate is a plan that actually would take one of our flagship universities, if not the flagship university, and University of Florida, and creating an online component to what they do. They already do online learning, but it creates a separate university within that system. And it basically says that you'll be able to get a University of Florida degree for about $12,000 to $15,000. And if you're on Bright Futures or you've got any aid whatsoever, you may be getting paid to go to school. And what it does is it says, wow, I can get a first-class flagship university degree on my wall from the University of Florida, and I can do it for a fraction of the cost. That's a big deal. And it's almost like a pilot project with one of our universities, but we're choosing one that is a preeminent university that has great market value in the private sector.
Are you getting much resistance to that?
No, I think, in the beginning, I think people were confused about what we were doing. They thought we wanted to create a new university, but a new university doesn't have a brand and it doesn't have accreditation. So what we did is we teamed up with our university that has one of the best brands in the state of Florida, if not the country, and obviously is accredited, and you're harnessing that brand and unleashing a type of technology and what we're calling competency-based learning, which basically says, we're not going to make you sit through semesters. We're going to also incorporate competency-based learning, which means if you learn something, you move on to the next class. You don't have to sit there and wait for an entire semester if you've mastered the content. It's a new way of thinking about online education. It's a new way of thinking about higher education, and our hope is that it takes off.
About a minute left, Mr. President. You've been talking about students being able to get a college degree for $10,000, and it also being a degree that's focused on certain priorities. Tell us about that, because that legislation is moving.
Our state colleges have stepped up to the governor's challenge to create $10,000 degrees to make it affordable for adults who are coming back and trying to improve their job skills and their employability, as well as young people who are coming out of high school and coming into college. As long as those degrees are tied to the realities and the needs of the economy, we think it's a great idea. And that's one of the things we're pushing hard for, along with Speaker Weatherford, and that is to make sure that we incent our colleges and universities to tie their curricula and their degree programs closer to the job market, so that when students walk across the graduation stage, they can actually get a better chance to get a real job, instead of the circumstance we have now, where half our college graduates from last year are unemployed or are underemployed. We think that's an economic crisis in the making, and we think that having an affordable degree that makes it possible for people to go to college and then be able to get a job and not be burdened with such excruciating debt is one of the best gifts that Speaker Weatherford and his colleagues and our senators and our governor can give to the next generation.
Let's go to break.